So I'm now at 9.4, which you'll see below me, war crimes. And this is the last part of this last lecture about Vietnam. All of the above things that I've been talking about are known examples of American military and civilian, because civilians control the military. That's the argument. That's the way America is supposed to work. Policy. So that is, if we think that they were wrong or went too far or caused unnecessary damage, then, and of course, it's hard to talk about that kind of thing in the surreal context of war, where everything goes too far, everything causes unnecessary damage. Then there are also the things that happened without planning. Like, this stuff was planned. What happens that doesn't get planned? And there was lots of it. And as I mentioned, Nick Tursa's book, basically it's a compendium of things that are whoops, oh, we didn't see that coming. So for instance, like, here's a quick one. But how planned can it be? I mean, I suppose that there are people who plan to do this, but the veterans referred to themselves or to other veterans as double veterans if they raped and then killed a woman. So there is a name for this. It was obviously illegal and unofficial. But at the same time, I don't know how many people were prosecuted for a rape and murder like that. Now, just because I don't know, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's very possible that people were put in the stockade for this kind of crime, these kinds of crimes. So that's a start. But there are much larger scale war crimes, which I'm going to talk about the most famous, because you have to know this. It's kind of like knowing about the death camps. I mean, you need to know this particular piece of history. And it's what is known as the My Lai massacre, which occurred on March 16th in 1968. And I'm going to show you a bunch of slides about this to give you a picture of like what actually happened. And a great deal of work has been done on My Lai to figure out what happened and when, and to build a timeline. And it's been discussed and interviewed, and there have been major meetings about it, and so on. So this is a little bit of that. What happened in the most basic terms is that a standard platoon from the U.S. AmeriCal Division, which is the AmeriCal Division, was a division that was formed by taking other armies and putting it together into sort of one big army, which is not unusual particularly. And this particular platoon was commanded by a Lieutenant William Rusty, as he was known, Calley, Calley. And they planned an assault on a village that was called Son My, or Son Mi, S-O-N space M-Y. Okay. The village was composed of, I've talked about this before, how these villages were composed of smaller villages. So remember in the Barthes poem, An Hoc, Letter from An Hoc 4, right? He's writing from An Hoc 4 because they didn't have separate names for the different villages. They were all the village of An Hoc, but they would have quite discrete clusters of houses. So My Lai was one of these, or Son My, Son Mi was one of these. Okay. It was also known and designated by the Americans as Pinkville. It was designated as Pinkville because on the maps, it was drawn in pink. That is, the area in the map was shown in pink. That's it. So the Americans didn't care what it was called, the Vietnamese name for it. They were like, Pinkville. Oh, Jesus. And specifically, we're going to focus on what happened to My Lai 4, which was one of these little clusters of houses. So what happens is Calley and his platoon are dropped off by helicopters at the edge of the village, and they begin to move through the village. And in 5 hours, from about 7:30 or so in the morning, Cali and his men enter the village, which is about 700 people. So it's quite sizable, right? And within about 4 hours, his men kill 500 of the 700 people, mostly by shooting them. There were no weapons in the village. So when they explored, there were no weapons caches, mortars, artillery, rifles, nothing like that. So, okay, what happened? All right, so now I'm going to switch to a bunch of maps to give you a picture, literally, of what's happening. Okay. So, as always with these kinds of stories, we are all reliant on a great deal of work that was done by historians and by soldiers, many of whom become historians, and some of whom, the soldiers who do the work are not the soldiers who were there, although they have testified about what happened. I'll just bring myself. So if you look over here, I think, I'm really not sure about this, but you'll see two little inset maps, one of which shows all of Central and South Asia, right? You'll recognize India, the sort of inverted pyramid shape of India, and then the red square to the right of India. And then you'll recognize the shape of Vietnam, which is this little tiny country. And the red square there indicates where Son Mi is and where My Lai 4 is. So here we have, as this map says, the area known as My Lai consisted of small hamlets known locally as part of the Son Mi village. So My Lai 4 is specifically what we're after, right? So these maps are drawn from somebody else's presentation, I don't remember whose, about, it might have been the BBC, I don't remember, but they're good maps, and so I'm using them. Okay, so what happens is, okay, so at 8:40 in the morning, the helicopters, so under this first platoon, you'll see here, first plit, under Lieutenant Cali, reached the edge of the village. So this is on, look at Troop C. And the second platoon make a detour for Bente. And the third platoon go in to mop up. Right? So this is where the three different platoons go. And the dots that you're looking at, little squares that are sort of violet colored, are houses. Okay, so you can see how these four combined things make up all of Son Mi. Okay, to keep you sort of in the loop, what happens here is this famous, there are a couple of sort of famous landmarks in this particular massacre, which are always referred to. So by 11 o'clock, we have the men who have, and they're going through the village looking for weapons and VC, right? That's what they're supposed to be finding. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So at this point, and this is my blue arrow that I've added here below me, which points to the ditch, which is the red square, and the path. And these are often referred to, so let's say, when did you get to the ditch? C Company breaks for lunch. Around 500 villagers at this point are dead. Many casualties lay on the main path or in the irrigation ditch. And the ditch becomes sort of a famous rallying cry for anti-war forces in the United States, not in Vietnam. Okay. So what's the pitch here? What happens?